Welcome to this, the second virtual business opportunity seminar of the year of the African Development Bank. I'd like to extend all of you a warm welcome. This is the day which is dedicated to our participants who are joining us from the Americas. Yesterday, as you may know, we had a session, an earlier session for Asia, for Africa, which I think went fairly well, except for one small hiccup in Zoom. Hopefully, we'll have smoother sailing for today. I want to start off just by explaining what the purpose of the seminar will be for today. And essentially, that is to introduce ourselves, that is the African Development Bank, our strategy, our key sectors, the way that we do business, and the like, to all of those who are interested in working with us, you who are the contractors who submit to win on contracts, whether or not those are project related, institutional, or for studies. We count on you in order to execute and to implement our projects in an appropriate manner, and of course for their success. And so this dialogue that we have with you twice a year, I think is quite important for you to understand, of course, how to work with us, but also to orient yourself in terms of the sectors that may be of interest and how our approach to those sectors has evolved, if you will, over time. Of course, we are doing this virtually. We wish, of course, that we could have seen you in person, met you in person, either in one of our regional offices or in Abidjan. Circumstances, however, being what they are, it will not be possible this time around, and we've certainly done our best to still engage with you over this virtual sort of manner. What we have done, though, in order to at least improve on the dialogue and the engagement, is that today's session will allow for B2B sessions or breakout sessions in those sectors that are our greater interest, if you will, to you. We understand, of course, that this is not ideal. I think one of the main points or advantages of attending these in person are the contacts, of course, that one makes either at coffee breaks or either in meetings and the like. We will do our best to have that same type of dialogue here, but here's wishing that the next BOS, which normally will be held around March or April sometime, will in fact be in person. Now, beyond simply about what this is for, what is it intended to do, I think it's also important to highlight what do we talk about when we speak of the potential markets that one can bid for. So in 2019, the bank financed about 172 projects valued close to about $10 billion US. So obviously there are opportunities there, I think, for a variety of firms. For us, it's most important to diversify the types of companies that bid on our projects. We think competition, healthy competition, is a very important thing and can only lead to better projects, better implementation for us. And so we're quite happy, particularly with any of the participants who are attending for the first time. Excuse me. We have, I think, a great program for you today. As always, we try to engage with the private sector or a company that has either received financing from the institution or is currently implementing a project for us. We're quite happy to have today as our guest somebody from the Korean company based in Rwanda who's implementing a project in the water sector, and we'll hear from them as well from the rest of our experts throughout the day. So I think without further ado, and hopefully I can sort out my camera issues soon. Without further ado, the first person who will be speaking to you, or today's first session, will be from the strategy department. I think it's a good place to start. The discussion will center around what is the bank's strategy that is high-level, long-term strategy in terms of helping our client countries in their development. And we'll be hearing from Asanatu Mansoure, who is in our strategy department. So I'll hand it over to her and ask the team to please help in loading the presentation. Thank you.
Valerie, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me, Valerie?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. It's doing the same thing as yesterday. How do I get the next slide and not duplicate my screen? Display setting. Okay.
Yes. Okay, display setting, and also I'll ask if Tanya from IT is still on, if she can assist, that would be great. And then Tanya, please call me bilaterally to sort out my issue, please. Thank you.
Okay. Hello. Hello.
Hello, we can hear you, Mrs. Massam.
Can you hear me? Is my screen projection well?
We can hear you and we can see your screen too.
Okay, thank you so much. Apologies about that. This is what the digital age, sometimes we have some glitches. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thank you also for your interest in the African Development Bank. As Valerie says, my name is Hasanatu Mansoure, and I'm from the Strategy and Policies Department. And I'm just here to give you a high-level global overview of the African Development Bank and our strategy and priorities for transforming Africa in the next, up till 2025. So my presentation will be in two parts. I'll just present, talk about our mission, what we do, and then before I go into our strategic framework, and then we'll end with some Q&A that I would take some of your questions if you have any. So as you know, the African Development Bank Group was founded in 1964, and it comprises of the African Development Bank, which was founded as the parent company. And then we have the African Development Bank, the African Development Fund, which was established in 1975. And we have the Nigerian Trust Fund, which is a revolving trust fund of 10 million, and it's dedicated to projects. The African Development Bank Group is made up of 54 African countries, which we refer to as our regional member countries. So that is where we make our investments. And we also have 27 non-African countries that covers Europe, North America, and Asia. And so in total, we have 81 member countries that are our shareholders. When it was created, the mission is to alleviate poverty. And our overall mission and how we do that is to spur sustainable economic development and social progress in all of our 54 independent regional member countries. And we aim to do this by mobilizing and allocating resources for investment in our regional member countries. We do this through two lending windows. I'm sure colleagues will explain that later. So we have the public sector window, which we lend directly to government. And then we have the private sector windows, which we lend to eligible private sector individuals that are dedicated to development in Africa. The second way that we achieve our overarching objectives is by providing policy advice and technical assistance to support development efforts in our 54 African regional member countries. Now, since 2013, the bank articulated its long-term strategy, which is valid up to 2022. And back then, we looked at what was relevant. We looked at what was necessary for us to be able to be at the center of Africa's transformation. So we looked at internally within the bank, nationally in all the 54 African member countries. We looked at regionally from the different economic blocs and also continentally. And we also looked at the conversations that we were having globally in terms of bringing economic development, and not just economic development, but a sustainable one on the continent. We identified two twin objectives that will guide our investments. These are inclusive growth. What we mean by inclusive growth is that every project or intervention that we do, we seek for it to be inclusive in terms of closing the economic divide, the gender divide on the continent, and also the transition to green growth. So all of our projects, we strive for it to have a climate change or a green growth perspective. When we were looking at a comparative advantage to say, of course, we don't have unlimited resources, be it financial or human capacity, we looked at the way for us to say, how will the African Development Bank maintain its competitiveness as the premier developmental financial institution on the continent? And we identified 5 operational priority areas that we believe that we can remain competitive. The first one was infrastructure development. I think the bank in the past 10 or 20 years, we have made significant strides to make infrastructure development a comparative advantage, be it establishment or building of roads, ports, water, sanitation, and the likes. So infrastructure development is one of our priorities. And for us going forward in terms of, post-pandemic, we're looking at quality infrastructure development and investing in enabling infrastructure and the policies that also promote sustainable infrastructure development. So that is the first operational priority. The second one is regional integration. As you know, Africa is comprised of 54 independent African nations, all with their own constitutions, national development agenda. So in terms of, for us to know that we have to do economy of skills, so we have a very strong push on regional integration. We actually promote most projects that has a regional reach. So in terms of, we deal with, if it's the ECOWAS, the West African bloc, the East African bloc, or the Southern African bloc. So we actually promote, or we are much more receptive to projects or investments that actually benefits countries. Case in point, if it's a power project, we would, as opposed to benefiting one country, say for example, if we have a power project that is in Ivory Coast, we'll rather promote or put a dollar investment in power projects that would benefit the surrounding regions. So probably Ivory Coast, Ghana, Liberia. So in terms of, that is our second priority going forward. Our third one, which we have made significant strides with this, is private sector development. We believe that private sector development is the engine of growth, and we have made significant strides in engaging the private sector. More needs to be done, and I think things like this BOS is one of the things where we are much more proactive in connecting with potential clients, in telling them, or marketing ourselves to say, this is what we do. The fourth operational priority is governance and accountability. One of the bottlenecks or the hindrance for foreign direct investment is the lots of red tapes or poor governance or accountability in most of our countries. So we promote governance and accountability in all of our projects that we do, and also in terms of the policy advice and the technical support that we offer to government. We have a strong emphasis on governance and accountability. The fifth operational priority that we believe that would help us to actually achieve our objective of alleviating poverty on the continent is promoting skills and technology on the continent. As we know, Africa has a youthful population, and we have to make sure that we are deliberate in our efforts of harnessing the potential of the youth and building the right skills for the jobs that are available. Because currently there is a mismatch in what is the jobs that are available and the skills that we have. So we are dealing with helping governments and also helping medical healthcare institutions, and in terms of technology, and trying to make sure that we are at the forefront of cutting-edge technology to improve our healthcare systems and our educational systems. So those are the 10-year strategy that we coined the 10-year strategy. On my right, we have 3 areas. I'm just depicting 3 areas of special emphasis. The 3 areas of special emphasis is fragile states. As we know, most of our African countries are experiencing some form of fragility, be it economic fragility, social fragility, political fragility, or even environmental fragility. So we have in the past 10 years, we've created a department that deals with fragile states, and all of our investments have fragile states. We do an investment with the knowledge of that the regional member countries experience some form of fragility. Second area of special emphasis is agriculture and food security. We believe that Africa has the potential to be the breadbasket of the world. And of course, with the with the world's highest percentage of arable agricultural land, we believe that we need to harness this potential for us to be able to achieve food security in all of our regional member countries. And finally, in terms of the areas of special emphasis, gender is a huge, big deal in the bank. So all of our projects have gender, and we view them through the gender lens, that we make sure that each and every, we achieve gender parity. So within the bank, in terms of internally what we do, our recruitment, and also externally. So all of our projects that we do, there's a strong and deliberate push for us to make sure that at least 50% of our beneficiaries are female. So that is the bank's 10-year strategy that we articulated in 2013. But moving forward, for us to be much more relevant and for us to actually be at the forefront of transformation, we articulated in 2015 what we call the high 5 priority areas of intervention. And basically, these are just 5 key focus areas that we have identified that would help achieve the operational priorities I've just highlighted to you. These are the Light Up and Power Africa, Feed Africa, as we call it, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and all of this leads on to improving the quality of lives for the people of Africa. Now, the high 5 priority areas have our targets and objectives are for 2025. We have, as we all know, now we've entered a global new normal. It cannot be business as usual. We have to regear how we operate and to remain relevant in all of our regional member countries in a response to post-COVID-19. So the bank's areas of intervention up to 2025 will be guided by our high fives with greater attention to quality growth and accelerated development impact. We would focus especially in areas of economic and healthcare infrastructure, scaling up climate finance in renewable energy, because as we all know, we aim to have universal access to electricity, which I believe is the panacea for sustainable economic development on the continent. We also aim to focus on improving access to water and sanitation, which has become key in this COVID-19 era. And also there will be a strong push as well for creating jobs for youth and women. So in terms of the Light Up in Africa strategy, the aim is to have universal access to electricity with 130 million on-grid connections and 75 million, yes.
Asante, you've got about 1 more minute remaining, please.
That's fine, that's fine. And 75 million off-grid connections. So that is for the Light Up and Power Africa. So for the Feed Africa, we aim to have agricultural transformation and lift about 130 million people out of extreme poverty. Now, going forward, in terms of all of these strategic partnerships, the priorities will be to implement by building on our comparative advantage and expanding on our partnerships. What we are going to do, we're going to employ both our traditional and non-traditional partners, and in terms of achieving these objectives, and we have estimated that we need about $170 billion per year. So we are going to employ partnerships. We're seeking partnerships in financial partnerships, knowledge partnerships, and investment partnerships. So in a nutshell, this is the bank's strategic priorities up to 2025. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Asanatu, for that. So I've sent out just a message to everybody to solicit questions for Asanatu. We'll be doing that via the chat function. I think it's the best, the best way. This way everybody can understand the question, and we're able to respond to them pretty much in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as we're waiting, Asanatu, why don't I kick things off maybe by asking you the first question. And it's concerning, in fact, the last high five. I think the last high five, which is improving the lives of Africans. Can you give us concretely examples of what types of interventions or what types of projects fall under that?
Yes. So the improving the, hold on, I'm trying to share my screen for this. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so in terms of that, we have for improving the lives of the people of Africa. So what we aim to do is to have social and economic opportunities, and we have what we call the Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy. So we have that improves in terms of we finance water projects, water and sanitation project. We have something called the Youth, the Youth for Entrepreneurship and Innovation Trust Fund, which is a very dynamic trust fund that is geared towards young budding entrepreneurs on the continent. So that is something that is one of the kind of projects that we finance. Healthcare services, we provide financing for those under the improving the quality of life for the people of Africa. We also strengthen educational systems. So we provide both financial and technical support and policy advice on healthcare services projects and also educational systems. So that is just the overall objectives for that is to create social and economic opportunities in our regional member countries.
Thank you so much. So apparently it's a sector, or at least the high five, very much focused on the social
the social
sectors.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Fantastic. All right, very good. I see that my first question managed to get people moving this morning. We've got a question from Roland Kropfel. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Roland. Can you see it, Asanatu, or do you want me to read it for you?
No, I need to share. Yeah, you can read it.
Okay, I'll read it for you.
Sharing the screen, I
sure. It says one key part was mentioned, which is access to electricity. Does this also mean that hydropower plants are in focus for AFDB?
Yes, thank you for your question, Roland. That is a very good question. Yes, hydropower is part of the renewable energy focus. So of course we have solar, we're dealing with solar because of where we are located on the equator. We have hydro, we have a lot of countries that have hydropower potential. Wind is another one, biomass. So yes, hydropower is one of our key focus areas as well. So I think we're having, can you hear me, Valerie? So we will have, I think, a
yes.
team on the, I don't want to give a lot, some investment officers that are dedicated in guiding you through what is required for you to, I think you'll have a breakout session, what is required as a private sector player in terms of what is needed for us to be able to assess the feasibility of such a project.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Asanatu. Let's get some other questions for Asanatu as well, please. I don't see that besides Roland, I don't see anybody else who's come up with questions.
And it might be too early for them there.
Well, you know, we do our best to find a time slot which is at least able to take into account the various participants.
Yeah.
So on that, one thing I may want to just add on to your response, and this is also for Roland's benefit, that generally speaking, we're trying to have 40% of financing to the energy sector be in clean, or at least be that is renewable. You'll hear a bit later on from somebody who's in our climate change department, Garrett Phillips, who will talk to, a little bit more about that. But certainly we appreciate the need to provide energy, obviously, to the continent, and also the need to try to be as clean as possible.
Yes, yes. Well, if I don't have any more questions, I've just projected my contact email for the department, and you can fill in, send in your comments, and we would answer to you directly. So it's just snsp_policies@afdb.org.
Perfect. Let me just actually type that. Can you type it, Asanatu? Do you want me to? This way everybody can be sure that they have. All right, perfect. Okay, so I don't think I see any further questions. Roland, I trust we've replied to the question that you had. I also see a little vote of thanks from Mike Ducker, who's from Valhalla Private, perhaps Capital Group. Thanks a ton for that. Thanks, Asanatu, for your time. I know that the new format requires you to be with us for 2 days instead of 1. But we do appreciate, as always, your time, Asanatu. I wish you a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
And we'll be turning now to our second presentation, which is from Jean-Guy Africa. He is with the Regional Integration Coordinating Department, and he's going to talk a bit about the structure of the institution and essentially how we're organized in order to assure delivery to our client countries. So Jean-Guy, whenever you're ready, and if the team can help you with your presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. And if you could just confirm whether you're seeing my presentation. I've just shared it. I just want to make sure.
We're seeing your lovely picture for the time being, Jean-Guy.
Okay, so that's not good.
No, It's fine, but it's not the presentation.
Okay,
Here
one
we
second.
go. Okay, you started screen sharing. There we go. And if you just put it onto your screen view.
Okay, now
Perfect.
you're seeing it.
You are good to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Valerie. So my name is Jean-Guy Africa, and I work in the Regional Integration Coordination Office. And basically, my presentation today will focus on the role of the complex, the regions, the country offices, and the role of the Regional Integration Coordination Office. So it's a lot to unpack. I could actually do a presentation for each. But I'll try to cover basically the functions of these three layers within the complex within which we operate. My presentation is structured as follows. First, I'll give a very broad overview of the complex in which we operate. I will highlight the instruments guiding our work, and then I'll discuss the role of the regions, the role of the Regional Integration Coordination Office. The acronym here, RDRI, is the acronym for the Regional Integration Coordination Office. I'll also discuss the role of the country offices, because we can't discuss about the role of the region without mentioning the role of the country offices. And then I'll leave the last point, which is really the most important one, some points to keep in mind for private sector. And throughout my presentation, I'll include a lot of links because it's quite a lot to cover in just 10 minutes. So it will be links that you can go at your own time and then read and just basically internalize when you have more available time. So the regions, the country offices, and the Regional Integration Coordination Office operate under a complex called the Vice Presidency Regional Development, Integration, and Business Delivery. And the complex oversees the bank's strategic priorities as it relates to regional integration, 1, the strengthening of country dialogue, 2, donor coordination, 3, project implementation, business development, and pipeline generation. So regional integration, dialogue, project implementation, business development, and pipeline generation for both SOs and NSOs. So the complex is divided as follows: 5 regional directorates, 1 in Central, East, North, South, and West, a country office in Nigeria, a transition states coordination office that deals mostly with countries emerging out of fragility, and a regional integration coordination office. You will probably have meetings with the transition states coordination office, so I will not discuss it, but I will cover the roles of the regional directorate as well as the regional integration coordination office. So I thought I would include this organogram so that you get an idea of the reporting relationships within the complex yes. So if you recall, I mentioned that the regions and the country offices operate under a complex called the Vice Presidency for Regional Development, Integration, and Business Delivery. RDVP is the acronym. So right below it, you have the Transition States Coordination Office. All the coordination offices are right below it. You see them in green here, plus an office to manage business development and results. And then right below it, reporting to the Vice President, are the Director Generals of the different regions: Central, East, North, South, and West. And below the Director Generals, you have the Deputy Director Generals and the country managers for the individual countries. So you have 5 offices in Central, 6 country offices in East, 3 in North, 6 in South, and so on, 10 in West, and so on. So basically, this is the structure: the Vice President, the DGs, the coordination offices, for regional integration and transition states, the Director Generals for the regions. So the instruments guiding our work. Quite a number of instruments guide our work, but I chose to highlight some of the most prominent and the flagship ones, if you wish, the ones that if you went through, you'd be able to capture the essence of what the complex attempts to realize. The first one is the Integrate Africa strategy. The second one and by the way, you can devise them into programmatic instruments dealing with strategies and policies, or resource allocation instruments dealing with the deployment of our capital, our resources, and so on. So in terms of programmatic instruments, you have the Integrate Africa Strategy, you have the Regional Integration Strategy Framework, you have the Regional Integration Support Papers for East, West, North, South, and Central. You have the Country Strategy Papers. In terms of resource allocation frameworks, you have the ADF Regional Operation Selection and Prioritization Guideline. You have the ADF Performance-Based Allocation Framework, and you have quite a number of them, but I included a link here where you can find all these strategy documents that basically guide our work. It's important to keep in mind those instruments because those are the instruments that are eventually translated into projects and programs, and the opportunity to collaborate with private sector will always come in the form of a project, a program, particular instruments that we deploy in support of overarching strategies, overarching instruments, and those instruments will be found right here on this link. Now, the role of the Regional Integration Coordination Office, we basically serve as the organizational hub, and we oversee the function of coordinating the work of the implementation of the Integrate Africa Strategy. We also manage the ADF resource regional operations prioritization exercise, which is a resource allocation, it's a framework to allocate a portion of resources from the African Development Fund. We are responsible for the dialogue at the continental level with the AU and UNECA. On the non-lending side, we lead in the dialogue at the global level, but also advocacy role. I'm getting a call. Sorry, I'm getting a call. Let me just cut this. Okay, sorry for that. We also mainstream regional integration into bank processes, and we are responsible for reporting on regional integration progress and results. And we spearhead knowledge initiatives such as the Regional Integration Index, the Visa Openness Index, and so on. So the Regional Integration Coordination Office mostly deal with coordination issues, mainstreaming of regional integration into bank operation and knowledge work, as well as resource prioritization of RO resources, regional operation resources. The regional directorates mostly are more operational in the sense that they deal with annual programming. They oversee the budgeting function for the countries under their supervision. They supervise the development of the country strategy papers. I'll get back to that later on. Very important documents, as well as other programming instruments at country level. They help define and develop the regional strategies, including the regional integration strategy papers. They oversee issues to do with the programming of lending and non-lending and for regional activities. And generally speaking, they engage in policy dialogue and aid coordination at regional level. And the last one is important. They act as repositories of technical expertise to support country and regional portfolio management. Very often at national level, there are skills that, the offices are sometimes small and certain skills are not present. So whenever certain skills are not available, for example, in legal, procurement, or so on, then it's usually available at the level of the region. The country officers are responsible for the country strategy papers. I've mentioned it a number of times, and you'll see why in the next slide. They're responsible for the country strategy papers, the analytical work that goes into the development of the CSPs, country strategy papers. They finalize the country lending and annual work program, and as well as budgets. They're responsible for the economic reviews and all the analytical work that goes into the dialogue with the government. They are responsible for the allocation of country resources through the management of aspects related to the performance-based allocation framework. They are responsible for policy dialogue and aid coordination with governments. And the country managers, if you remember the slide here, the country managers report to the director generals. The last slide, which is really points to keep in mind for private sector. I mentioned a lot of instruments. I mentioned the role of the Regional Integration Coordination Office, the fact that we operate under the complex for regional integration and business delivery. I've mentioned the role of the regional directorates. I've mentioned the instruments that guide our work. If I was to leave you with two primary things to remember and two primary documents, it would, in terms of where the opportunities will come from in terms of deepening cooperation with the bank from a private sector perspective, it will be number one, the country strategy papers, and number two, the regional integration strategy papers. And the reason within those two documents, you want to look at the annexes and the sections titled Indicative Lending Pipelines. The indicative lending pipeline highlights the bank's upcoming projects and programs and initiatives for the given country and for the given region over the next 5 years. The CSPs are designed over a period of 5 years. They are the result of a protracted dialogue with the country to determine the areas of operational focus. And out of those areas of operational focus are derived a list, a lending pipeline, if you wish, that details the list of programs, initiatives, and the operation that the bank plans to finance in the foreseeable future for both sovereign operations and non-sovereign operations. And you can find them on this link here, afdb.org/en documents/strategy documents. You'll find all the CSPs and all the regional integration strategy papers, and again, go straight into the indicative lending pipeline. So eventually, the list of projects in the indicative lending pipeline will result into a project appraisal report. And out of the project appraisal report, which is also available publicly, if you go through the PARs, you will be able, and you look through the components and so on, you will be able to see how in practice the project will be implemented. And all of our projects are implemented mostly through the procurement of goods, procurement of works, and procurement of services. And then again, as I was saying earlier, through the majority, the bulk of the opportunities to deepen collaboration with the bank will come out of the implementation of projects. And the way those projects are structured is essentially summarized in our project appraisal reports. And the project appraisal reports are available on the link that I've just provided now. So here, you're probably all going to have a session with procurement. They'll go into details as to how private sector can compete for opportunities in works, in services, in goods, depending on your expertise. So this slide right here is probably the most important one as far as you're concerned. I also thought I would end the presentation with some of a menu of the available bank products for private sector. The opportunities to cooperate with the bank are not just through project-related procurement. We also provide other types of products. We have lending instruments, we have guarantees, we have equity, we have risk management products, we have trade finance products, technical assistance funds, and so on. So this graph here summarizes the type of products. And again, the link where you can find more information is available right below. You probably will have a session with the team in charge of financial products, and they are better equipped to go into the details as to what each product entails and the terms associated with each. Thank you very much, Valerie, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Perfect, Jean-Guy, thank you very much for that. I've solicited some questions through the chat function, and whilst we're waiting for that, I'll kick it off maybe with a question for you. And that concerns the Transition States Coordination Office. I understand that we're one of the only MDBs to have an office dedicated just to transition states. I believe it was previously called Fragile States.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of background as to why the African Development Bank thought it was important to have this particular office dedicated to transition states?
The reason we came up was, and you're right, before it was previously called fragile states, and the terminology was inappropriate in many respects. It has a connotation of a very negative connotation. So it was changed to transition states, and the idea really was that transition states face particular challenges that are different from other countries, particularly post-conflict states. The situation, the political dynamics, the security issues, a lot of the elements make it so that we needed to come up with mechanisms that ensured that our services were aligned to the needs of this particular group of countries within Africa. And it was a realization that they could not be, the needs of those countries could not be addressed the same way that we address the need of other countries. And this is why we came up with the CRFA, which is basically a tool to assess the extent of fragility for a given country. Valerie, maybe you know the name, the name of the acronym CRFA: Country Fragility and Resilience Assessment. There you go. Country Framework for Resilience and for Fragility and it's all about assessing a country's capacity in terms of resilience and fragility, and basically, and it covers aspects such as security, the political environment, and many other aspects. So just the idea was that fragile transition states have different needs, and we needed to figure out a way to allocate they have bigger needs, and we needed to figure out a way to allocate a significantly higher portion of our resources and capital to those countries. Because ultimately, the idea is to tackle poverty, and if countries are in situations of fragility, if they're dealing with issues of post-conflict reconstruction, if they're emerging out of conflict, then it's impossible. We cannot treat them with the same prism that we treat countries that are not facing the same issues. So that was the essence of why we felt the need to establish a separate office, but not just a separate office. An entire subsegment of the African Development Fund actually is dedicated. The Transition Support Facility, TSF, is dedicated to addressing, the conditions of fragility in transition states. So I hope I've addressed your question. I was actually hoping you would have a full session on fragility, which is why I spoke about the other issues other than fragility,
No, thanks very much for that, Jean-Guy. Unfortunately, we don't have a session on fragility, but I think it's very important that people appreciate some of the challenges that can come from working in a transition country. And I think that's particularly why, even as we provide financial resources to these countries, we also provide them with the support in order to implement these. And so you may get a project implementation unit getting capacity development. You may get arrangements with other partners in terms of security and the like. And so because we do have, I think the number is about 16 or 17 of
17,
our countries,
yes,
17, yeah. 17 countries that qualify for financing under the Transition States Facility. It's really important to accompany them, because you can't really do a project in, I don't know, let's say Somalia, the same way that you do a project in Morocco. I think it's
exactly.
simply understanding that there's a difference there. And so that's one of the reasons why we have this. And it's important, particularly for those of you who might be listening who have an interest in financing any projects in transition states, to understand what we do to ensure that projects that we have in those countries are are successful. Voila. All right, there are some comments or questions coming in. I don't know if it's particularly for you, Jean-Guy, but why not? I think you're polyvalent enough.
Yes,
there's a question from Chris Smith. So there you are. Why don't you try and take that one?
Okay, I'm saying it. Does the bank ever participate in PPPs type capital projects? Definitely. Yes, yes. And we have multiple times in the past. In fact, we strongly prefer PPPs because our resources are scarce. So we always look to leverage our tools and instruments to rope in the private sector, to bring in private sector. So yes, Chris, the answer is basically yes. In terms of how, it depends on the project, whether we're dealing with an energy project, whether we're, in which country we're operating. The list is very long, but because there are many maybes and in terms of how we go about it. But just to go back to my presentation, a lot of the instruments, particularly the guarantees, are geared towards basically eventually pushing for more PPPs on the continent. The next one is I'll be interested in finance and SME session. Okay, that's to you, Valerie, on SME. It's the recommendation to hold a session on finance and small and medium-sized enterprises. I see another one here, the financial sector development session. Okay, I think I just have one so far on PPPs.
Yes, I think that is it. And so if I don't see anything else, I will thank you for your time, Jean-Guy, as usual. Thanks a ton for that. Thank you also for providing to the participants the links within your presentation where they can find things like our country strategy papers and our policies. I think it's very useful to do that. And again, just to confirm to our participants, you will be receiving most likely a link with all of the presentations. And in those presentations, you'll also find information on particular policies and documents who may be helpful to you, particularly for country-specific information. So thanks very much, Jean-Guy. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Our next presentation is going to be, actually, I see that we have a break for 5 minutes. Apologies for that. All right, I will stick to the schedule. We've got a 5-minute break. This will allow you to stretch your legs and to fiddle with your computers if you need to. It is now 11:58, so we will see you at 12:03 on the dot. Okay, thanks very much and see you just in 5 minutes. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
See the screen now?
We can, and it's perfect, so over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mose Mabiko Fetile, and I'll be doing the presentation today. This is based on the institutional procurement, as already mentioned by Valerie. I was hoping that my colleague Ashraf would have done the project procurement one, so I will not go into detail in terms of the difference. In any case, let's start. That's the table of contents. The difference between corporate procurement and project procurement, Ashraf will go into the details about project procurement. Corporate procurement covers acquisition of goods and services, as well as works as required for the consumption of the bank. So anything that requires the day-to-day operations of the bank to move efficiently, we do the procurement. How is the procurement function organized? We have, it's actually a decentralized arrangement. We have the procurement team, which is in the HQ, the headquarters. They deal primarily with the development of policies, manuals, procedures, and guidelines, as well as any standardized procurement documents that we require and contracts document. In addition, they implement high strategic value contracts, meaning all those contracts that the rest of the bank, including the country offices and regional offices, require to buy into. Then they would implement those kind of procurements and contracts. We also have a second team, which is in the regional offices and country offices. These primarily deal with the needs and requirements for the country offices and regional offices, where there's no need to do a large-scale procurement. For example, if they need a local stationery shop to supply the bank, that's what they do. We buy a whole range of items, including goods, services, and works. I think I've mentioned that. In addition, we do procure real estate. And by procuring, I'm not talking about just acquiring it, but also rentals of real estate. A lot of the offices that we currently occupy are offices that have been rented. And we go through a procurement process to identify those. Here I have a slide that quickly indicates what it is that we procure. You'll see that one of the major categories that we spend on is IT equipment, leasing, as I've just indicated, and rentals, as well as financial services, maintenance, and security and safety. Those are the major items that we procure. Statistics from 2019. Last year, we conducted procurements estimated at US $68 million. And that translated into 9,000 transactions. And these contracts were awarded to worldwide vendors. I'll go into a little bit on the eligibility in the subsequent slides. Procurement methods. Usually the default procurement method for the bank is competition. So competition is the rule. That's why I have that at the bottom of the slide. We do it through advertising expressions of interest, doing pre-qualification processes, open competition. Sometimes we do require to go for restricted competition. For example, if the bank has decided to standardize on certain brands or items, we do have to go for a restricted competitive process. It doesn't make sense to open up the competition. Also in situations where it's small value items or where there's cases of emergencies or where it's justified, our policy allows direct procurement. In terms of innovation and sustainability, currently we are working on implementing what is called supplier relationship module of SAP. SRM is a web-based kind of system that will enable us to do procurement processes online. So there'll be e-tendering, e-procurement, if you will, and then it will have a supplier portal where there'll be interaction between the bank and the vendors. I'll give an example. We may be able to do e-bidding processes whereby suppliers are required to submit all their document or proposals through the portal instead of sending all the hard copies by courier, DHL, and that kind of thing. So this is an exciting project that we've undertaken. And I think it is very appropriate and relevant at this point where we are having the coronavirus pandemic. We had a situation where there was a lockdown and a lot of the vendors, we had to stop our procurement processes essentially because we could not continue with the lockdown in place. Another thing that we have implemented is the simplified procurement methods for low value purchases. I remember when I joined the bank, we did not have this particular process in place. What it is each of the offices or each of the departments have a purchasing card, or it's similar to a credit card, where they can actually just go to the service provider, the vendor, and swipe the card to acquire the services. So this is something very good and makes it a little bit faster than trying to work with purchase orders. What are the documents that we work with? We have a corporate procurement policy. That is a policy that governs the whole bank in terms of how we do our procurements. We do have general terms and conditions as well for purchase orders and services. These are available on our bank website, and you are free to have a look at them and see whether it's something that you'd be interested in working with us, given those particular conditions. Most of our vendors and the suppliers are required to adhere to the suppliers' code of conduct. It's also available on our bank website. We also have, and this I'll mention a little bit later when I talk about eligibility, a list of member countries which we may procure from. Finally, we work with a consolidated annual procurement plan in which we require all the country offices to submit their requirements, and we publicize the procurement plan just so that interested suppliers, vendors, or service providers may see where the opportunities are and choose to bid as and when the time comes. In terms of our procurement policy, the basic principles of the procurement policy is that we try to achieve value for money when we do procurement. What does that mean? That means that we really try to have an optimal combination of the price, quality, delivery, and performance when we're doing our procurement. And this is underpinned by certain principles, including transparency. We try as much as possible to have reliable, timely information for the bidders. Competition, I've already mentioned this, ensuring that opportunities are accessible to everybody, to a wide range of vendors. Fairness, we try to make sure that everybody is treated fairly in the procurement process. And then finally, sustainable development, where there is a need to have, to adhere to environmental aspects and that kind of thing, we consider it as we do the procurement as well. Eligibility, what does a vendor or service provider, contractor need to have to be eligible? Before that, we have 24 or African countries 54 African countries, as well as 27 non-African countries that are member countries of the bank. So if you are a contractor or provide services, you need to be registered in one of those countries. It may be a natural person that is registered in the country. In eligibility, a little bit later about company is conflict of